Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to really pull apart complex topics and find the core insights for you.
That's the goal.
And today, we're jumping into sustainable regional planning. It's all about how we shape the places we live, work, and, play for the long term.
Right. Thinking about the environment, the economy, and our communities all together.
Exactly. For this deep dive, we've looked at, well, quite a range of material.
Yeah, everything from the big ideas behind smart growth down to very specific tools for urban design, even the financial mechanisms.
The money side.
And how we build infrastructure, transportation systems, so they're genuinely sustainable.
So our mission here is pretty straightforward. Cut through all that complexity, give you the essentials on how regions can grow, how they can thrive sustainably and resiliently.
Consider it your shortcut to understanding these, frankly, really important ideas.
Okay, let's dive in. When we talk about sustainable regional fundamentals, what are we actually getting at?
Well, at its heart, it's really about a big shift. A move away from that traditional planning approach that, well, often led to sprawl. Development spread out everywhere, using up tons of resources.
Right, the typical suburban model we often see.
Exactly. So sustainable fundamentals, they stress this interconnected way of thinking, looking at environmental health alongside economic prosperity and, crucially, social equity within communities.
So it's that triple bottom line idea, all three working together.
Precisely. It's much more holistic than just focusing on, say, only the environmental piece.
Got it. Okay, so that brings us naturally to smart growth. That seems like a really central concept in the materials we looked at. What's the core idea there?
Smart growth, it really came about as a direct answer to the problem sprawl creates. The basic thought is, look, growth is likely going to happen anyway.
Sure, development happens.
But we can actually guide it, shape it in ways that make communities more attractive, economically stronger, better for the environment, and more resilient too, dealing with things like climate change impacts.
And it's not just a fuzzy concept, is it? I remember seeing specific principles.
Oh, absolutely. The EPA and the Smart Growth Network laid out 10 core principles. Pretty concrete stuff.
Like what? Give us a few examples.
Okay, so things like mixing land uses, having homes, shops, offices closer together, designing buildings more compactly, not spreading everything out. More options, making development decisions predictable, fair, and transparent. And, really importantly, encouraging collaboration, getting the community, stakeholders, everyone involved in the planning.
So smart growth paints the positive picture. This is what we should aim for.
Yeah.
But the sources also hammered home the downsides of not doing this, right? The problems with sprawl.
Oh, definitely. Sprawl has some really serious negative consequences. Environmentally, you get habitat loss, more air and water pollution, higher energy use because everyone's driving further.
And health impacts, too.
Big time. Public health suffers. Less physical activity because you have to drive everywhere. More respiratory problems from car emissions. Even mental health can be affected, social isolation. Less access to parks and green space.
Wow.
And something quite stark, the sources pointed out the link between these spread out development patterns and higher rates of traffic injuries and fatalities.
That's sobering. And it's not just environment and health, is it? There are other costs.
No, it hits on the social and economic fronts, too. Socially, sprawl can deepen segregation, separating people by income, weakening community connections, and economically, it's just inefficient. Think about the cost of building and maintaining all that extra infrastructure roads, water pipes, sewer lines stretched over huge areas, plus the energy costs, mainly gasoline.
Okay, it sounds like a slam dunk for smart growth then. Why isn't everyone just doing it? Are there roadblocks, objections?
Yeah, there definitely can be resistance. You often hear concerns about property values.
The MMBY effect. Not in my backyard.
Sometimes, yeah. Fears that density or mixed use might lower values, although, interestingly, the evidence often points the other way. People also worry about housing affordability, while stricter rules make housing more expensive. And sometimes it's just resistance to rules about what people can do with their own property.
Okay, understandable concerns. What's the counter-argument from the smart growth side?
Well, proponents argue that, looking long-term, smart growth actually builds more economically vibrant places, more choices, more opportunities. It tends to lead to more equitable outcomes, too, with diverse housing and transport options.
And the environmental benefits.
And the environmental soundness, absolutely. All of which adds up to a higher quality of life and potentially, yes, stronger long-term property values.
Right. So smart growth gives us the big picture, the direction. Now, one of the sources we looked at from the Polson Institute gets into their sustainable urban planning principles.
Mm-hmm.
How do these relate to smart growth? Are they different?
They build on it, definitely. Think of smart growth as the why and the general what, the Paulson Institute principles. They get much more into the how. They provide a more detailed, more actionable framework.
Or specific guidance?
Exactly. They were initially designed for U.S.-China collaboration on sustainable cities, but they're really broadly useful. They take those high-level smart growth ideas and translate them into concrete metrics, requirements you can actually apply regionally or even down to a specific development site.
So, like, instead of just saying mixed land uses, they might specify actual ratios or how close things should be.
Precisely. They get into the nitty-gritty. Areas like environmental quality, ecological restoration. They offer specific ways to assess climate risks, promote things like sponge city concepts for water management.
Sponge city, what's that?
It's a great term, isn't it? It basically means designing cities like sponges, using landscapes, permeable surfaces, green roofs to absorb, clean, and manage rainwater naturally rather than just piping it away.
Okay, clever. So reducing runoff, improving water quality?
Exactly. And they even set targets, like saying at least 18% of new regional development should be public space. They also strongly push transit-oriented development, TOD.
Right, building around transit hubs.
To cut down on car dependence, yeah.
It sounds much more prescriptive in a good way. What other areas do these Paulson principles cover?
They also hit on land development and integration, emphasizing urban density, real mixed-use development, green building standards, setting targets for waste reduction. Then there's environmental protection, resource recycling, pushing for renewables, water efficiency, figuring out sustainable funding for it all.
Funding is key.
Always. And finally, a big piece on social inclusiveness and culture, stressing meaningful community engagement, preserving cultural heritage, barrier-free design for accessibility, making environmental info public.
Very comprehensive. Seems like a practical toolkit to complement the broader smart growth philosophy. Okay, let's shift gears from principles to, well, actual governance and implementation. The Delta Regional Authority's Plan RV came up as an example. What does that tell us?
The DRA is a good case study for how regional development can be tackled strategically, often with federal support structures involved. These federal regional commissions and authorities, FRCAs, they're set up specifically to deal with economic challenges in certain regions.
Like Appalachia or the Delta.
Exactly. And they do it through partnerships. Federal, state, local governments all working together.
So it's not just Washington telling people what to do.
Not at all. It's designed as a federal-state partnership. For the DRA, you've got the governors from the 8 Delta states working with a federal co-chair, and they're guided by a strategic plan.
Which is Plan 4 in this case.
Right, their current one. And it lays out 4 main goals: investing in public infrastructure, water, sewer, broadband, transport, big focus there. Then fostering workforce development and education, supporting entrepreneurship, innovation, and strengthening community resilience, helping communities prepare for and bounce back from challenges.
So broad goals. How does that translate into actual projects getting funded on the ground?
They work closely with state agencies, but also these local development districts, LDDs. They're usually multi-county groups that really know the local needs.
Grassroots knowledge.
Yeah. And the funding itself has priorities built in. At least 75% has to go to the most economically distressed counties in the Delta region. And at least half of that funding must go towards basic public infrastructure. Water, sewer, the real foundational stuff.
So there's a clear focus on need.
Definitely. And it's worth remembering, this isn't unique to the Delta. You see similar setups with the ARC in Appalachia, the NBRC up north, the SCRC in the southeast. Each one is tailored, but the partnership model is common.
Interesting structure.
Yeah.
Okay, connecting these big plans back down to the actual physical shape of our towns and cities.
Yeah.
The sources talked about urban design tools, the Transect model, form-based codes. What are these about?
Right. These are tools to actually translate those planning goals into the physical places we experience. The Transect model, it's basically a way of looking at the environment as a continuum, from totally rural, natural areas.
Yeah, nature preserve.
Right, all the way to the densest urban core, like downtown. It breaks the spectrum down into 6 zones: rural preserve, rural reserve, suburban, general urbis, urban center, and urban core. Each zone has a different character, different intensity.
So it's like a gradient of development intensity.
Exactly. It helps us think about how different levels of density and types of development fit together. The aim is often to encourage more compact, walkable, mixed-use places, especially as you move up the transect towards the urban end. There's even a model zoning ordinance, the SMART code, that actually uses these transect zones to organize its regulations.
Okay, so the Transect gives us a way to think about different place types. How do form-based codes, FBCs, fit in? How do they turn that idea into rules?
Form-based codes, yeah, they're a really different way of regulating development compared to what most places use now.
Which is conventional zoning, right?
Right, conventional or Euclidean zoning. That primarily focuses on separating land uses. This zone is for houses, that zone is for shops, that one for industry. FBCs flip that. They prioritize the physical form of the development.
What does that mean exactly? Physical form.
It means they regulate things like building size and shape, how buildings relate to the street, facade design, the look and feel of public spaces like sidewalks and squares. The goal is to create predictable, human-scaled, appealing places people want to walk in.
So instead of saying, this zone is R1, single-family residential, an FBC might say, in this zone, buildings must be 2 to 3 stories, built close to the sidewalk with windows facing the street, maybe require a porch.
Precisely that kind of thing. And a really key point, FBCs are actual regulations. They're legally adopted zoning laws, not just advisory design guidelines.
Okay, so how is that fundamentally different from the conventional zoning most cities have had for decades?
The main difference is the primary focus. Conventional zoning separating uses. Form-based codes shaping physical form and the public realm.
Public realm meaning streets, sidewalks, plazas.
Exactly. Conventional zoning organizes land by use category. FBCs organize it based on the desired physical character of a place, often using something like the transect zones. Conventional zoning often treats that public realm as secondary. For FBCs, it's integral. They think about how the buildings shape the experience of the street.
And you mentioned FBCs are more proactive.
Yeah, they tend to be about achieving a community's vision for what a place should become. Conventional zoning is often more reactive, trying to prevent negative impacts, like keeping industry away from homes.
It sounds like conventional zoning might have created some of the problems we talked about earlier, like sprawl.
Well, that's a criticism, yes. By separating everything, it makes driving necessary. It can limit housing choices, sometimes lead to, monotonous or disconnected places. FBCs try to fix that, foster walkability, mixed uses, development that fits its context.
So the Transect and FBCs work together.
They really do. The Transect offers the vision, the language for different kinds of places. The FBC provides the regulatory muscle to actually make that vision happen on the ground.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these pieces connect. Planning goals, design concepts, regulations. The sources gave examples, didn't they? Denver and Harvard, Massachusetts.
They did. Denver's citywide FBC is a big deal, seen as a national model. What's cool there is how they integrated sustainable design criteria, things from the LEED ND rating system, right into the code itself.
LED for neighborhood development.
Right. And they've used it everywhere, redeveloping old industrial sites, downtown, infill projects. It shows FBCs can work at a large scale, driving greener building and more predictable, walkable urban form.
And Harvard. That's a much smaller place.
Right, Harvard, Massachusetts. They looked at an FBC for a specific commercial corridor, Air Road. The town felt the existing zoning just wasn't creating the kind of lively, mixed-use street they wanted.
So they used an FBC to target that specific area.
Exactly. Their proposed FBC focused on how buildings relate to the street, making it more walkable, managing parking better. It aimed to get commercial uses on the ground floor in mixed-use buildings, allow more types of uses overall, control building scale, and even incentivized affordable housing with density bonuses.
So FBCs can be tailored even for smaller towns or specific corridors.
Absolutely. It shows how you can use them to achieve very specific local goals, boosting local business, adding housing types, keeping the town's character. And in both Denver and Harvard, you see that focus on shaping the public realm, not just the private lots.
It really underscores a shift in thinking, doesn't it?
It really does. Away from just trying to manage negative side effects of development, which is kind of the old zoning mindset.
Damage control.
Yeah, damage control. Towards proactively shaping the physical place to meet the community's goals for livability, sustainability, economic health. But like those examples show, it takes real effort up front. Community conversations, visioning. You need to agree on what you want before the code can help you get there.
Makes sense. Okay, we've covered planning ideas, design tools. What about the money side? How do fiscal tools play into regional sustainability and equity?
Ah, yes, the financial angle. This is crucial because, as the sources point out, something called fiscal zoning can really get in the way.
Fiscal zoning.
Yeah, it's when local governments chase development mainly for the tax revenue it brings in, trying to attract high-value commercial properties or expensive homes, while maybe trying to limit development that costs more in services, like affordable housing.
A race for ratables.
Exactly. And that can hinder regional cooperation, lead to exclusionary practices, and work against broader sustainability goals. So one tool to counteract that is tax-based sharing.
Tax-based sharing. How does that work?
Okay, the basic idea is within a region, communities agree to pool a portion of the property tax base from new commercial and industrial development.
So not residential, usually just commercial industrial.
Often, yes,
Yeah.
CI. So a percentage of that new CI tax base goes into a shared regional pot. Then that money is redistributed back out to the participating communities.
How do they decide who gets what?
Usually based on a formula that considers fiscal capacity, often looking at things like the total market value of property per person in each community compared to the regional average. Communities with lower fiscal capacity, less property wealth per person, get a larger share back from the pool.
So it helps level the playing field a bit.
That's the idea. Each town then applies its own local tax rate to the share it receives. That's sometimes called the distribution levy. Sometimes there's also a uniform regional tax rate applied to a piece of the CI value to generate the shared pool. It reduces that incentive for every town to fight just for its own tax base.
Encourages more regional thinking, potentially less competition over desirable development. Interesting. Okay. Final major area, sustainable infrastructure, specifically managing water, low-impact development, LAD, sustainable drainage systems, SEDIS. What is the story here?
Right, LAD and SEDIS. They represent a really fundamental change in how we handle stormwater runoff. The old way was basically get the rainwater into pipes and get it away as fast as possible.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Pretty much. LAD and SEDIS do the opposite. They try to mimic how nature handles rain. They encourage water to soak into the ground, infiltrate, be filtered by plants and soil, be stored temporarily, or evaporate all as close as possible to where the rain actually falls.
So dealing with it on site, what are the benefits of doing that?
Oh, the benefits are huge. First, you reduce the sheer volume of runoff. That means less flooding downstream, less erosion in streams and rivers.
Better water quality, too.
Definitely. As water soaks through soil and vegetation, pollutants get filtered out naturally. Plus, you recharge groundwater, which is vital for drinking water supplies in many areas. These systems also slow the water down, which takes pressure off the traditional storm drains during big storms.
Yeah, and they probably look nicer than concrete pipes.
Often, yes. Things like rain gardens, green roofs, permeable pavements, they can make places more attractive, even create wildlife habitat.
Sounds great. Are there downsides or challenges to implementing LID?
There are practical things to consider. Maintenance is key. These aren't systems you can just build and forget. So who's responsible? Is there proper guidance? That needs to be clear.
Public perception.
Generally pretty positive. People like green infrastructure. But some education helps. Performance in really cold climates needs thought. Frozen ground can limit infiltration. And if you're on a site with contaminated soil, you need special designs like liners so you don't inadvertently spread pollution into the groundwater.
Okay. And study sustainable drainage systems, that's the UK term. Basically the same idea.
Yeah, fundamentally the same philosophy. Manage runoff near the source, mimic nature. The UK has actually been quite proactive. Since 2014, there's generally an expectation that all major new developments will include
They have a hierarchy too, right?
Oh, they do. A kind of preference list. First, try to prevent runoff altogether, rainwater harvesting, things like that. Then, control it at the source, permeable paving, green roofs. Then, manage it on the site using swales, basins, and finally, if needed, regional controls like large ponds or wetlands. They also consider ground conditions, infiltrate where you can, use other techniques where you can't. CRI's SEDIS manual is the key guidance document over there.
It sounds like making LID or SEDIS the standard really requires system-wide changes.
Absolutely. You need changes in regulations to allow or require it. Developers and designers need to learn new practices. The public needs to understand the benefits. And those maintenance responsibilities have to be sorted out. It really takes planners, engineers, landscape architects, policymakers all working together.
Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground, from philosophies like smart growth down to specific design codes and water management techniques. If you had to synthesize all this, what's the core takeaway about creating truly sustainable regions?
I think the biggest message is integration. It's not about doing one thing well. It's about weaving all these threads together synergistically.
It's about connecting the dots.
Exactly. Connecting the broad goals of smart growth with the practical guidance from something like the Paulson principles. Using design tools like the Transect and Form-Based Codes to give those goals physical shape, and underpinning it all with supportive fiscal tools like tax-based sharing and sustainable infrastructure like LID and SUDES. It all has to work together.
It's the system, not just the parts. What are the big themes that run through all of this, the things that seem crucial for success?
Looking across the sources, a few things really stand out. First, vision and collaboration. You absolutely need a clear, shared vision for where the community or region wants to go, and that has to come from genuine engagement with everyone involved. Collaboration across different fields is vital.
No silos.
No silos. Second, context matters. These aren't cookie-cutter solutions. Principles and tools have to be adapted, tailored to the specific place, its climate, its economy, its culture.
Right. What works in Denver might need tweaking for Harvard, Massachusetts.
Precisely. And finally, it's about moving beyond just doing isolated good projects. It's about building interconnected systems that tackle sustainability comprehensively at that regional scale.
This has been incredibly illuminating, a real deep dive into how complex but how interconnected sustainable regional planning is. We've gone from smart growth ideas to FBCs to sponge cities. It's clear it's a huge undertaking, but essential. Requires thinking holistically, working together.
Absolutely. Planning frameworks, urban design, fiscal policy, infrastructure, they're all pieces of the puzzle. You can't achieve real sustainability by focusing on just one. It really is about that integration.
Okay, so to wrap up, here's a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. How could the principles and tools we talked about today apply in your own community, or maybe a region you know well? What do you think are the biggest opportunities there? And what would be the toughest challenges in trying to create a more sustainable future in that specific place?
Yeah, really think about that local context.
We definitely encourage you to explore the sources we mentioned further. Keep digging into these concepts. This deep dive, well, it's really just scratching the surface on the path toward building genuinely integrated, sustainable regions for everyone,